Welcome to The Synthetic Lens. I'm David Carver. Today, a story that may prove to be one of the most consequential policy decisions of the 21st century. The Trump administration has revoked the EPA's endangerment finding, the legal foundation that has allowed the federal government to regulate greenhouse gas emissions since 2009. If this stands, the United States will no longer treat climate change as a public health threat. Marcus Chen has been tracking the science and the politics.
David, let's be precise about what happened, because the details matter enormously. The endangerment finding was a 2009 EPA determination rooted in decades of scientific research that said greenhouse gases, carbon dioxide, methane, nitrous oxide, endanger public health and welfare. That finding is what gave the EPA legal authority under the Clean Air Act to regulate emissions from vehicles, power plants, and industrial sources. On Thursday, in the Roosevelt Room of the White House, EPA Administrator Lee Zeldin stood next to President Trump and announced they were revoking it. Trump called it the single largest deregulatory action in American history. And the scientific basis for this reversal?
This is where it gets really ugly. The administration relied on a report from the Department of Energy's Climate Working Group, a panel that dozens of independent scientists publicly rebuked, calling it full of errors. A federal judge ruled the DOE violated public records laws when creating that group. The panel has since been disbanded. So the scientific foundation for this repeal is a discredited report produced by a group that was found to have been created illegally.
Zeldin's language was striking. He talked about driving a dagger into the heart of what he called the climate change religion.
Right, and that framing is important. This isn't being presented as a policy disagreement. It's being presented as ideological warfare against science itself. The EPA is now arguing that the Clean Air Act was only meant to regulate pollution that harms health through local and regional exposure, not global atmospheric changes. That directly contradicts the 2007 Supreme Court ruling in Massachusetts versus EPA, which found that the agency is required to regulate carbon dioxide under the Clean Air Act. So this is heading straight to the courts, and likely back to the Supreme Court. Ingrid Halverson has been looking at the economic dimensions, and they're staggering.
David, the administration claims this will save Americans $1.3 trillion. They did not explain how they arrived at that number. Meanwhile, the Environmental Defense Fund has done their own analysis. They found that revoking the endangerment finding, combined with rolling back vehicle emission standards, would result in up to 18 billion additional tons of greenhouse gas pollution by 2055, equivalent to China's annual emissions. And the cost to Americans? Up to $4.7 trillion in damages from climate and air pollution.
So the administration says it saves $1.3 trillion. Independent analysis says it costs $4.7 trillion.
A 3-to-1 ratio in the wrong direction. And here's what makes this economically perverse. The immediate beneficiaries are fossil fuel companies and automakers, who can now sell less efficient vehicles at higher margins. The costs, extreme weather damage, healthcare burden from air pollution, infrastructure failures and crop losses, those fall on ordinary Americans, on taxpayers, on the communities that get hit by wildfires and floods and heat waves. The administration frames this as helping working families by lowering energy costs, but working families are the ones who live in flood zones and breathe the air.
What's the international dimension?
Catastrophic for American credibility. The United States is the largest historical emitter of greenhouse gases. We signed the Paris Agreement, withdrew under Trump's first term, rejoined under Biden, and now we've gone further than withdrawal. We've declared that the science itself doesn't apply to us. Every other signatory to the Paris Agreement is watching this. China, the EU, India, they all have their own political pressures to slow down climate action. America just gave them permission.
Marcus, let's talk about what this means practically. What stops being regulated?
Immediately, this eliminates all vehicle greenhouse gas emission standards. Transportation is the largest source of direct greenhouse gas emissions in the United States. The Biden-era rules were designed to push electric vehicles to 56% of sales by 2032. Those rules are now gone. combined with the administration revoking California's ability to set its own vehicle standards, and Congress eliminating penalties for fuel economy noncompliance, automakers now have essentially zero regulatory pressure to reduce emissions. The administration has also separately proposed finding that power plant emissions don't contribute significantly to dangerous air pollution, which would extend this logic to every stationary source. As one former EPA official put it, instead of the entire house of cards collapsing at once, it's going to be like a row of dominoes.
And the legal fight?
Multiple lawsuits are coming. Earth Justice, the Environmental Defense Fund, the state of California. Governor Newsom has already announced legal action. The core question is whether the EPA can simply declare, against the overwhelming scientific consensus and against a Supreme Court ruling, that greenhouse gases don't endanger public health. Environmental lawyers I've spoken to are cautiously pessimistic about the timeline. These cases will take years, and this Supreme Court, with its conservative majority, has already shown willingness to limit EPA authority. That was the West Virginia v. EPA decision in 2022.
Former President Obama said on social media that this leaves Americans less safe, less healthy, and less able to fight climate change. Also, the fossil fuel industry can make even more money. John Kerry called it un-American and Orwellian.
And the survivors of climate disasters, the families who lost homes in the LA wildfires, the communities flooded in Texas and Alaska, they're watching the government declare that the phenomenon destroying their lives isn't a public health threat.
There's a number I keep coming back to, David. The 3 hottest years in human history were the 3 years immediately preceding this announcement. This isn't abstract. This is measurable. The planet is warming, the consequences are accelerating, and the response of the most powerful government on Earth is to declare that the science doesn't count.
Lee Zeldin said the endangerment finding was used to steamroll a left-wing wish list of costly climate policies. He said Americans just want a reliable, affordable car to get to work. And there's a real tension there between the immediate economic pressure families feel and the long-term catastrophe that scientists are documenting in real time.
That tension is real, but it's also manufactured. The cost of renewable energy has plummeted. Electric vehicles are approaching price parity with gas vehicles. The market was already moving. What this does is remove the regulatory floor that was accelerating that transition and protecting public health while it happened. It doesn't lower anyone's gas bill tomorrow. It just ensures that in 20 years, the bill will be much, much higher.
The EPA received 500,000 public comments on this proposal. The administration finalized it anyway, leaning on a discredited DOE report produced by a panel that a federal judge found was created in violation of the law. That's the foundation of what the president called the largest deregulatory action in American history.
That's our show. I'm David Carver. The lens is synthetic. The stories are real. We'll see you next time.